All right, welcome everybody to the May 2023 edition of the Minnesota Woodworkers Guild monthly meeting. So got 4 presenters going to be talking to us, give a presentation from the recent Northern Woods show that we just had. So before we get started with that, we got some door prizes we're going to give out to all the local people here. So I think Richard has the tickets ready to go.
Okay, so what you're going to do is look at the last 3 numbers on your ticket. Okay, so let's start off with a digital LCD display.
Yes, I can.
Okay, the number is 415. 415. Okay. See, first time you get, yeah. So next we've got a metal detector. The number is 408. Another new guy. Thanks for joining. Okay. Now we've got a Wixie digital angle gauge. I use mine all the time. So 401. Oh, okay. I'll throw yours back in first. Okay. 396. There you go. Now you're going to get some accurate cuts there, Roger. Okay, then we've got a stainless steel gauge for center marks. And it's 411. Okay, diamond sharpener for double-sided, two different grits. That was mine. Don't need it. Okay. 402. Okay, now we've got a clamp. And the winner is 409. Okay, next we have a gallon of tight bond. What's that? 3. Tight bond 3. 403. And then a gallon of tight bond original. 400. And the last is a beeswax paste. It's a mixture of beeswax and mineral oil. Okay, 401. Okay, that's it for the door prices.
Okay, moving on, we're going to get into our presentation. First up is Jason Holtz. Jason is the 2022 recipient of the Guild Scholarship, and he used that to attend the course at the Crimson Guitars Luthiery School, located just outside of Dorchester in the UK. Jason is a 3rd-generation craftsman and spent 3 years as an apprentice for chairmaker Jeff Miller in Chicago. He has been building custom furniture professionally since 1998 and has been working out of a co-op shop in Minneapolis. His work has been exhibited in juried shows with the Chicago Furniture Designers Association, the Minnesota Woodworkers Guild, and the art of fine furniture at the History Center in Winona, Minnesota. His work has also been featured in the Chicago Tribune, Fine Woodworking Magazine, and FDMC. So Jason. Yep, now we are.
Hello. Hello. All right. Well, first of all, I'll tell you guys a little bit about why I wanted to do this. I started playing the guitar at about age 9 and was passionate about it for probably the next 15, 20 years. And somewhere in that time, I became a woodworker. And my passion for the guitar kind of went by the wayside, and it sat under the bed collecting dust. And so I decided at one time right after my daughter was born, and I wanted to try to combine those two passions. So I said, guitars are wood. Why don't I make my own guitar and see if that can light a fire under me? So I started building my first acoustic guitar. And I did it largely in the evenings when my daughter was asleep and I wasn't ready yet. So, it was a long project, and but it did achieve my objective of playing the guitar more, because that guitar turned out well, and I decided I wanted to do it more. And part of my motivation also is that a lot of the furniture I build is large and heavy, and I'm not getting any younger. And I don't want to build 900-pound tables for the rest of my life. So building things like this that are sub 8 pounds seems like a really good idea. So on with the slideshow. I chose Crimson Guitars because in 2020, when the world shut down and everyone was watching more YouTube and Netflix than ever before, somebody pointed me to this guy, Ben Crow, in the UK, and Crimson Guitars is his company and school that he runs there. And I just went down this rabbit hole of electric guitar building, which I hadn't done yet. And I was an electric guitar player in a previous life, and I hadn't really played one in 20 years. So I'm going to build one of those. So I built a couple and wanted to learn more, because there's a lot to know. And so on with this slideshow. Here's where the journey started, at MSP Airport. This case right here was full of all of this wood. And nobody questioned me at all, even though there was cocobolo in there, which should not have made it out of the country. There's my good luck for the trip. I was able to get an exit row seat with lots of leg room for an 8-hour flight. Here is proof that there are no straight lines in England. And here's the Dorchester train station. It's about a 3-hour ride on the train from London to Dorchester, which is southwest of London, and about maybe 30 minutes from the coast. Really, really beautiful country. There is my trusty steed for the 2 weeks that I spent there. I was really, really nervous about driving on the wrong side of the road. So it was hard enough to get used to biking on the wrong side, especially when the roads are very narrow and very hilly. The ride from the inn I stayed in to the school's out in the middle of the country, and it's in like an old dairy building, and there's a couple businesses in there, the guitar company and school, in addition to a caravan building workshop. A caravan is like a camper over there. And these were like, I don't know, sort of gypsy or circus looking trailers that are not meant to be mobile, but they have like iron wheels on them so you can get them to where they go. And this was right near the school. If rainy, dank England can have big solar farms, I think we need to get our act together over here. I'm a sucker for thatched roofs, and they were everywhere. This was the favorite sign I saw. This is right down the road from the school. It was about a 5-mile ride and about 50% uphill and 50% down. And all of these hedges alongside the road, those are what they call brambles over there. And it was about perfect time. So if I was hungry, I could stop and have a snack and get purple fingers. So in guitar work, electric guitars in particular, there's a lot of template work. And one of the great things they had there at the school, they had a dedicated router for just about every operation, from the size of the bit to the template guide. And they were just in a rack on the wall. You knew which one you needed to use for each operation. And it made it pretty straightforward. So here's that collection of wood that I brought with me. The black limba is the body, and this Bastogne walnut top, mahogany neck, and the Cocobolo fingerboard. You start with the neck because everything is based off the scale length of the guitar, which is the length from the nut to the bridge, and depending on that length, the spacing of your frets changes. So you start here and build everything else around it. And here's some preliminary work on the neck. It's got a slot in the center, which is for an adjustable, it's called a truss rod. Its function is to allow the neck to be adjustable both directions to counteract the tension of the steel strings, which is significant. And then also you can see there's 2 1/4-inch slots alongside the truss rod, and those are for these carbon fiber rods, which are just for reinforcement. Not necessary, but a good idea, especially on a guitar where the neck is integral to the instrument. It's not a separate piece. This is called a neck through guitar. So the neck is one piece of wood all the way through, as opposed to a bolt-on or a set neck, which it's glued into a mortise, but it's removable when necessary. So the carbon fiber is a good idea. Here's that gorgeous piece of Cocobolo, which was purchased on the last day of Youngblood's existence. I think they had that wood for 30 years before I bought it. And you can see it's on this stainless steel template. And there's a notch for the precise location of each fret. And they had a radial arm saw with a like 32nd-inch blade. And on the fence, there's just a little pin, and it's just like cutting box joints. You know, you just slide the template onto the pin, and you can cut all 22, 24 frets, however many there are, in about 3 minutes. Which, if you're building a lot of guitars, that's how you want to do it, instead of by hand with a saw and calculating all those positions. There's after they're cut. And here is then gluing the fingerboard onto the neck. There's Go back a second. For locating the fingerboard on the neck, we drilled 2 small holes, one in the first fret up here. This is with like a 16th inch brad point drill bit, one there, and then one down here at the end. And once you drill those holes, then you transfer them into the mahogany, and you just use a toothpick for location. So that keeps it from squirming when you glue it on. So there's the gluing operation. Here's the next step, which is I am thicknessing the headstock here. And this was a super bare bones setup. You know, that's just an oscillating spindle sander with a fence clamped onto it. And you can see there's a spacer on the front side because the fingerboard is now taller and you need the clearance, but you're basically using that spindle sander as a drum sander. And you just tap that fence, clamp it down till you get to the right thickness. And there's a lot more complicated ways to do it, but that is really simple and with a very simple machine that most people have. And that was one of the big things I took away from the course there is there was nothing high tech in the shop, nothing that any of us don't have in our own shops, which was, you know, kind of fun to see that anybody can do this in their basement or their garage. You know, they have a $1 million CNC machine in the next room, but you don't need it to build guitars. So here is the black limba wings of the body. You can see here how well the grain matches up on this cavity cover on the back. I was able to achieve that because this material was a lot thicker than I needed, and I resawed off a whole slice off of this piece and was able to use that piece to make this cover, which is just a friction fit with a little bevel there. And it's fit well all winter and hasn't got stuck yet. Here is, this orange stuff was some acrylic knife scale that I picked up at Woodcraft that I thought was going to look really good with this Coca-Cola, but it was just too loud. So I decided to go a different direction. Here's some shaping of the neck. I learned a new method for doing that based on creating facets, which helps you get to a very uniform shape. Largely done with Shinto rasp and Iwasaki files. This is the control cavity for the electronics. They had bins and bins of laser cut templates there for control cavities, pickup routing, bridge cavities if necessary, headstock shapes, and you could just pick out what you needed from these bins. And then if everyone doesn't know the super glue and masking tape trick, you'll never buy double stick tape again. You apply super glue or masking tape to both surfaces, and then you put super glue on it and stick them together, and it's just like double stick tape, and it peels off clean and doesn't leave any residue. So all these templates are used that way. And I use it in my shop all the time now. So here is the abalone inlays that I did on the fingerboard. That was done with a Dremel and I think 32nd inch router bit. The abalone blocks were pre-cut, and you super glue those onto the fingerboard in the right spot, then you scribe around them with a scalpel, and then it's all hand routing and chiseling from there. There's with them all done. You can see that little toothpick there that was one of the locating pins. And
But did you glue the fretboard onto the necklace?
tight bond. And there are the frets installed. There's the frets done. There's many, many steps in between those two photos, but it's a long, boring process, which
So frets come in a big roll.
frets come in a big roll. You cut them roughly to size. You install them with a fretting hammer, and then you also have an arbor press, which has a, I don't know if you know this, but a guitar fingerboard is not flat. This is radiused like 12 inches, and that's just done with a curved sanding block. So in the arbor press, they have brass cauls that are matched to the radius of your fingerboard, and you use that press to firmly seat these into the slot. And there's super thin super glue in the bottom of the slot, so you don't want them coming back out. So once they're glued in and pressed, then you have to level them, which is done with a aluminum beam with sandpaper on it. But that takes the crown shape of the fret off, and you end up with a flat spot, which you don't want, because you want the shape to be kind of like that, or you have issues with the playability. So then you have to reestablish that crown, and that's done with files. There's special shaped files that are concave. But there I learned the method of just using a triangular file, and there's a stainless steel fingerboard guard that just has a slot in it, and you use the triangle file and the fret guard so you don't damage the fingerboard while you're filing. It's just a few swipes on each side, and then there's special files for getting the bevel here on the end that you can see, and then there's special tools to check that all the frets are in the same plane, because if you have a high fret or a low fret, that's going to cause problems with how it plays. And once you get them all where you want them, then you get to polish them. And they have a big buffing polishing wheel there, and you tape masking tape off the whole thing except for the frets, and you put jeweler's rouge on there and polish them up so they're nice and shiny. I don't know how long they stay that way, but we'll find out.
What metal are they?
These are nickel silver, which is the most common. There's also some stainless steel frets have come out in the last probably 10 years and are kind of all the rage, but one, they'll last forever, but they're hard on the tools and a lot more difficult to shape because of the hardness.
Just a quick announcement. If you guys have questions, raise your hand and I'll bring the mic to you, because otherwise the people on Zoom aren't hearing what the questions are.
Here's the headstock with the tuner holes drilled. And that is matching walnut from the body, glued onto the face of the headstock. And I was able to resaw off a chunk. So my truss rod cover there, this piece, grain matches perfectly. This is the nut. That's what holds the strings in position and at the right height. And that's typically made out of bone. here's the operation of gluing the body wings onto the neck, and great care taken to keep it all level and flat. I learned about these clamps there. These were made by Triton, but I think Craig makes a similar thing called the Automax. It just goes in a hole in your bench top, and no matter what thickness it is, you just clamp it right down to the bench. It's great. Use them for all sorts of things there. And there's post glue up. And here, this is using a bunch of templates, which are just in the bins there as scrap lumber. Essentially, what I'm doing is making a template to route the mortise in the walnut to fit perfectly around the fingerboard. So I'm just using things as straight edges and using that super glue and masking tape technique to glue all those pieces together. I made a perfectly tapered thing that fits around the fingerboard. And then here's what one of my fellow students was routing next to me. Those are squid and jellyfish. The kid was 18. And he was there for 3 months. So here's that template right about the time I was going to route that pocket. And there it is, post routing. Fits around very well. And then that channel is for wiring between the pickups and the control cavity. That's gluing the walnut top onto the mahogany and black limba. There's my hand cut abalone inlay that's super glued on there. So the next step is I scribe around it with a scalpel and then route the cavity with the Dremel router like that. And there it is once it's in. Back on my commute on the bike. I had a weekend off. I went down to the ocean, down in Weymouth. And it was a beautiful spot. Saw some really, really old stuff and cool old doors. It's amazing. Some of this stuff is like 900 years old. This is the oldest pub in England, I think. It says built in 1540. Continuous operation all that time. Yeah. So here is, here's the stage where I need to shape that heel where it joins the body. You can see the neck up here is all carved already, but there's this big chunky bit here, which one of the benefits of a neck through guitar is you can have a very smooth transition between the neck and the body. And that was done just with files mostly. Files and rasps, and then onto the orbital sander. And that is it, all ready for finish in 6 days. And that was one of the biggest things that, you know, I built, I think 5 guitars prior to going there, and each one took, you know, 6-8 months maybe. And if you sit down and just build a guitar, you can do it in 6 days, which was pretty remarkable. And kind of proves to me that it could actually be a viable product to sell. And especially if you were doing more than one at a time. So this is with the first coat of finish on. This is just an oil finish that that they make there. They have their own line of dyes and stains and oils. And then I had 4 days left, so I decided to make another neck for the next guitar, which I showed at Northern Woods. I didn't bring it here, and I got to use that orange stuff that I liked so much. And there's England. And then came time to wire the guitar, which I'd always had trouble wiring previous guitars. And with a good teacher and a good diagram and really explaining what needed to go where and what these symbols on the diagrams I'd seen before actually meant, it was surprisingly easy, and I got it on the first try. And it almost looks neat and tidy, like I knew what I was doing. And it fit. And so now it's time for all the setup, which makes the guitar play how it should play, which involves string height and intonation, which is if you see on the guitar, each one of these saddles for each string is independent, and it's adjustable in its length, forward and back. So that means that the E string, 1 octave higher, has got to be the exact same tone. And that is accomplished by moving this forward and back. And then I learned all kinds of things about setup that I didn't know, which will make all my guitars better. And here's the finished product. And I'll pass this around and you can all take a look at it. And close-ups there. And here's me on my last night on the way through London. The Tower Bridge, the railings on it are solid teak, about 4 inches thick and 8 inches wide. Yes. Questions?
Got one?
But can you play screaming rock and roll on it?
Maybe. I didn't bring an amp, but. Can you?
Not for a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, that's gonna do it for
All right.
Jason. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we got Roger Knudson's gonna introduce Cindy Darwin.
Well, Cindy is a friend of mine living up in Moose Lake, and we met because we play in the Moose Lake Community Band. She plays clarinet and I play at the flute. And for a few years, she kept saying, I want to show me how to sharpen a chisel. Like, for about 4 years, I said, well, you can come down and sharpen that chisel. Yeah. Well, she finally retired. She and her husband built a shop and she got started and now comes to my house every Wednesday with a 6-pack of beer. It's a high paying thing. And she's learning woodworking. And last year, the year before, she got the $1,000 scholarship to Maine Center for Furniture Craftsmanship. So here is Cindy Darwin.
Roger? Yes, so in August of 2021, I got to go to the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship and start my chair. This is the
It just fits square.
yes, This picture is what I went out to Maine with, because Roger said, you have to have a project in mind and you should have a sketch, and you should have a sketch of it. So that you know what you're doing.
Cindy, I think you turned your mic on.
Oh, I didn't turn it on. Okay.
Turn it on.
There you go.
Okay, so can you hear me? Okay, good. All right. So this is the sketch that I went out to Maine to the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship in Rockport, Maine. I've been going to Roger's, I've been going for, I don't know, 3-4 years. And he's been so nice in teaching me all the different joints and background in woodworking that I hadn't had before and really wanted to get. So after we had gone through a bunch of bending and curvature techniques, he suggested going out to the curvature class at the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship, because he had gone there and been really inspired and thought it was a good class. So Yuri Kobayashi is one of the instructors, and Seth Rowland. Both were very nice, great woodworkers. So at the class, I made a model of my sketch. I picked out the wood and I got a good start with this chair, but the majority of it, I probably only did about 10% after getting back and knowing how much there was to do on it. The wood they had out there available and that I was shown in one of the demonstrations was air dried white ash, and that is a superb wood to do steam bending with because of the straight grain and how it just works well. So they had demonstrated in one of the demonstrations they did, and they took this 1x2 wood white ash and they bent it in a real tight curve. And so I thought that they can do that, then I can do my chair. So that's what I decided. They had some there I could get. So let's see. So then after picking out the wood, then I needed to make a form so that we could get started. This is the form that I used for the back of the chair there. And one of the things that I wanted to have happen with this, and I had been able to do it on the model, but it didn't work so well on the chair, was to put a extra piece at the bottom of the chair of the back to see if we could get the ergonomically to have your back, have it come out and curve, but it didn't work so great. But the form itself worked good. So that was the back, and this is one of the arms. Notice that there's all kinds of clamps and holes, and the band clamp that we use to go around. Right after you pull it out of the steam bending box, you put the band clamp on and make sure you've got your middle marked, know where to start, and just start bending it with the band clamp and then clamping it with other clamps as fast as you can and with help. Then after I got back, we had a beer and bending party at my house so that we could do the other arm and be able to get it to this point. And so you have to have 3-4 people and to be able to get the bending process all done. So let's see. One of the things that was kind of hard in knowing when you build a chair, because chairs are tricky, knowing how high to have it, knowing the angle of the back, and knowing how to actually where to put the back to attach to the sides so that you have the right angle and the right height. So those were challenges that we had to work through. So this is when all of it's glued and dadoed. But while I was still trying to figure out, I was going to show you on the previous one, there's this piece here, one of the iterations of what we were trying to figure out what to do in the back and on the sides for just to hold the cushion in and for the chair's comfortableness. And I think that one of the best things that we have in the Guild is that we have a broad range of people and ideas. And Mark Laub came up one day and saw the chair and he said, you know, I'd put a fan on that back and on those sides. So I thought that was a good idea and worked that out. And Roger had a suggestion of finishing off all the edges of the wood and so that they were rounded to an extent. So I thought that was a good thing. And so that's what happened on that as well. And if you can see all the fan splines, all those, there's different forms, bending forms for each one of those. Well, actually, there's one for each pair on the back and then again on the side. So lots of different bending forms, lots of different steam bending times, and then having a place where we can dry those steam bent and have them ready to install. So that's all I have. Do you have any questions? Okay.
I'm curious if I was able to take a class with Yuri too, and did she show the bending method inside of a poly tube, and did you try that at all on your chair?
That's what we had to do for the back. There was a steam bending box, but it was only 5 feet long and the back of the chair is 7 feet long. So that's what we ended up doing. And it was a poly tube and that worked really well. We just set that up on a couple of sawhorses with the steamer underneath and attached. Just dripped out the excess water, just dripped out the edges and it worked really well. Yes.
So was it less urgent did you keep it in? Was it less urgent for the clamp up? Or did you take it out to clamp it up?
I took it out to clamp it up.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, so I would say it would the same time and same. You have to stick to it, right? Yeah, and get it bent as it's cooling down and yeah.
Thanks.
So, yeah.
Question. How did you cut the mortises on the inside of the arch or the back?
Well, I put all these pieces in this bottom base part, and then there's a pressure point where you figure out where to put that, and then mark those little squares, and then it was a chisel and chisel it out. Yes, that's right. So they're glued and pressured in there and pretty sturdy. I did have one of the splines that broke at one point and we had to put a new one in. So redoing that is always fun.
Have you experimented at all with that wood lamination?
That is one of the processes that we've done in Roger's shop, and I've made some legs with bendable plywood with veneer and is that what you mean?
Yeah, that's sort of laminated.
Okay, and then laminated with different laminations. Yeah, yes, and using the vacuum bag, that's a fun process as well. We had out at the school, there was, we did vacuum bending in with laminations and also with veneer and coopering and brick cutting it in brick forms and getting a curve in that way along with the steam bending. And then we also had, we used the pipe with the torch and all that. We had all kinds of different, so they covered all of them. Pardon me?
Just curious about how you clamped your coopering projects at this.
I don't remember.
That's fine.
I'm sorry.
That's fine.
Rubber tubes. Is that what you've done? With tape? With a band clamp? Yeah, I think that's what. Sorry, I don't know. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Cindy? All right, thank you, Cindy. And congratulations on your grand prize win at the
Thank you very
Northern Wood
much.
Show.
Thank you.
Much deserved. So next up, we got Roger Knudson. Roger is a last minute fill-in. We originally had a different exhibitor lined up to come in, but unfortunately Matt Brune wasn't able to make it. So Roger was gracious enough to give us his presents and bring his beautiful bow tie chair. So Roger.
I'm not teaching anybody else woodworking until I win best of show. It's totally unfair. You look at this and first thing comes to mind is why? Why the hell would somebody do that? And I have two answers and they're very deep, they're very philosophical, so bear with me. The first answer is because. The second answer is, why not? All right, I've spent much of my life making pieces of furniture, serious stuff, reading the books, measuring carefully, once in a while making joints that actually fit. And once in a while I'd get a thing in my mind, oh, you know, I think I built this crazy thing. No, I better not. I better stay serious. Then I thought, you know, I'm getting pretty close to tipping over for the final time. I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And why not? So I built a big chisel. Some of you may remember, I've kind of branched off from serious furniture for the moment. 5 foot long chisel stuck in a piece of board with the chip coming up. You maybe that was in the show. I built a Salvador Dali piano, which actually is very sophisticated because it's tied in with fine arts. Salvador Dali, his work, the bent piano, and Igor Stravinsky, who's holding up the bent piano. You remember that for a couple of years ago. It's still in my shop for sale. I don't know why people haven't snapped it up. And then I built Andy's can opener, the big tomato soup can with the big saw cutting the lid off. The subtitle was Deconstructing Pop Art. So that too was a very sophisticated artistic statement. So I thought, actually it's sold. It's sitting in a guy's house in Baltimore. And then one day I thought it'd be really cool to make a great big bow tie. And again, why? And then why not? Well, then once I made the tie, I said, well, it's got to be connected to something. And that's what I came up with. The gorgeous legs are modeled after my own. Nice gastrocs, you know. The thing is, as we go through this stuff, we get so serious. I don't do it for a living. I've made and sold a lot of pieces and been able to have some trips to Europe from that, but I don't have to make anything. I don't have to sell anything. So why not? And that's a serious question. So if you think of something fun, outlandish, crazy, just do it. And you'll learn something along the way. I don't know exactly what I learned here, but it's a solid basswood. And I've got special joinery. These are called knee joints. And these are called hip joints. They don't pivot. It's got a, middle-aged belly, which is supposed to be your lumbar support. This is supposed to be a chair. You can sit in it, but takes about 5 seconds and you're out of it. It's not comfortable. So my big point here is have some fun with your woodworking. If you get a crazy idea, start doing it. It doesn't hurt. If I didn't make this, I'd have been making some other coffee table and another coffee table. Yeah, so what? So have some fun. Let your mind go, let your creativity go, take off those boundaries that we get put on us somehow through life, and have a little fun making wood. Thanks.
Anybody have any questions?
Have you shown it anywhere else or do you have plans to?
I will put this the other side on the guild show in Winona in June. Like I said, I will put this in the Winona show in June. Yes.
What was your technique for building that? I mean, do you use power carving tools or hand rafts or combination or?
The technique was all basically hand tools. I'd saw out a basic shape, maybe of the body, and then just start carving away, chisels, rasps. This is entirely hand carved, obviously cut out the outline and just go for it. The legs, a lot of rasp work. Once you get some basic stuff, you just start taking meat off until you get the shape you like.
Is it all basswood or what?
It's all
material?
basswood, but those are real tennis shoes. There's always somebody to challenge, why didn't you carve the tennis shoes and the shoelaces out of wood too? I told them where to go with some. Yeah, just because.
Are you willing to talk about what the judges said and your sheets?
Well, they didn't say much, actually. They gave me some couple of A's, couple of A pluses, and said, one guy says, fun for you, fun for me. Maybe he's the one that gave me the award. I don't know. Judges come to these shows, they're not used to seeing this stuff. The funny thing was I walked in before we put the show up, walk in the back door as we do before we put the show on the floor. Everybody says, I know who made that. I got a reputation now, I guess. What do they say? Bad attention is better than no attention at all. Any more questions? Yep.
When is that Winona show and fill us in?
Yeah, the Winona show, sorry to say I can't remember the dates. It's in June. And it's at the Winona History Center right in the middle of downtown. There's usually 8 or 9 or 10 of us woodworkers in the show. And it's usually a really, really good show, top quality stuff, a lot like our own Northern Wood show, just not as big. And those of you who haven't been to Winona, it's worth the trip. It's a really, really cool town. There's 3 institutions of higher education there. There's one of the biggest, what's the name of the tool company? The nuts and bolts. Fastenal. How did this huge nationwide thing get situated in Winona? I don't know. There's the Minnesota Marine Art Museum, which is unbelievable. And it's not a bunch of boats. The theme has to be water. And it's right, the museum is right on the river. But it's one of the most fantastic little art galleries in the state. It's just super. So Winona is a great place to visit and come down for the show. I think, what's the name of the show again, Jason? The Art of Fine Furniture. And well, the art of other furniture too. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right. Where's Dan? Right behind you. All right, next up, we got Matt's gonna introduce John Walkowiak.
John Walkowiak won an award at the Northern Wood Show. He's a lifelong resident of Minneapolis, been woodworking since he was a kid. And he has hand tools that he made by hand that he's going to tell us about and show us some of his tools and tell us how he made them.
And can you turn the light back up? I got some props here, so give me a couple of minutes. I thought I better bring along what I'm talking about. I'm a hand tool woodworker. I tell people I have two apprentices in my shop, Davey Delta and Peter Powermatic. And after they get done with the wood, then I use hand tools. I restored antique furniture for a living. And I'm just got really interested in how things were made without power tools. It just fascinated me to see that they could do, they were doing as fine a work, close to work 200 years ago as that can be done now. And so that led me to investigating the tools and collecting the tools to examine them. And then of course, and then it seems like whatever I have, I modify it. I'm not, I always think I can do something a little better than what somebody else did. So I'm always doing that. And I lucked into meeting Mike Seamson, who was one of the judges, and you guys would probably all know that name. He has got a school in Chicago City, School of Wood. And there's a group of us that meet out at his shop every Tuesday. They're drinking beer right now and eating brats or something. But about 10 years ago, we decided to make some projects, joint projects. And we started out with saws. And, we had to figure out how a saw was made, how we could make it. And I had antique examples to bring out there so we could see how those were made, 200 years ago, and also the Diston type saws, more modern ones. And so we proceeded to make those things. And so the group of us made hand saws. These guys, this handle shape with the flat bottom is called a London pattern. It was popular in the 18th century and early 19th century in England, of course. They were never made in the United States, but I like that kind of handle, so I chose that. And I had some saws that had this, so I copied that or got my influence on it, and so that's the kind of handle I made. The blades, we ordered 1095 Swedish spring steel from McMaster Carr. And of course, it had to be different thicknesses for a hand saw, for a big back saw, a small back saw. It was different thickness, appropriate thicknesses. We got, this stuff comes in coils or sheets or coils, depending on how much you order. So we got that and marked out the size of the blade, the length and width and stuff, and took it to a sheet metal shop, and they sheared it into manageable sizes. And so from that point, we worked it down. In Mike's shop, there's an antique hand shear. It's got a handle about this so long and some big teeth, and you can just kind of nibble away. It's like a sheet metal shears, only it'll cut really thick stuff. So you can, you know, we would, to taper these things, that's how we got the final shape for whatever kind of saw we wanted to make. I think everybody had the nib on the saw, which is a decoration. There's all kinds of theories about why it's here, but it's just a decoration. In one of Henry Diston's earliest catalogs, he addressed it and said it was just a holdover from earlier times. And I've seen 16th and 17th century saws where this part was really elaborate. I mean, scrolly and everything. And so it was a decoration that just got shrunk down to this little thing. But then that has to be filed down to taper that. So there's work there. And then, of course, in about 1940, it was eliminated. It didn't do anything. So it was one step the sawmakers didn't have to do. So we did that. The teeth were cut on an antique Foley toother. Foley made, was based in Minneapolis. And they made saw sharpening and saw making tools. So this thing goes along, it has a crank on it, or you can run it by an electric motor. And there are racks, they're called, which are geared to the number of teeth per inch that you want to have. And you put the correct rack in there and turn the handle, and it advances it. And a big anvil comes down, or cutter, and triangular cutter, and just cuts the teeth away. And then they have to be hand filed then and sharpened and set. The fasteners for the saws that I make, again, this is based off of early hand saws, and these are called split nuts, in that the bottom nut is split. So these things are set in flush, and then you tighten them up, and somewhere here I've got a screwdriver, but the screwdriver has to have a fork. You know, you file a fork tongue kind of a thing in it, and that's how they're tightened up. It's not the best way, and that's why they changed them in about 1880. The first patent was made, because these things are pretty thin. The shank is thin, and if the saw loosens up, it wears and wears on the brass, and everything gets loosened up and wants to come apart. But anyway, I like the look of them, and they fit with the handle. So that's why I chose them. The handle for my hand saws, this is the smallest one I made, 26-inch rip and crosscut also, but this is curly maple. The back saws, I've got some pieces of the back. These are a piece of brass that's squeezed together. It's called a folded back. And again, this was done by the sheet metal shop. We tried doing it. It can be done in your home shop, but it takes a pretty big jig and a lot of stuff to do it. So they bent it. The problem was, though, that they didn't anneal the brass. I don't know that we knew enough to anneal the brass beforehand. So there were some fracture lines at the bend that all had to be filed out. So that was extra work. All the inletting was done by hand. I used another handsaw to saw the kerf in the handle. And in different sizes, typical or early type dovetail saw had a tapered blade, and it was all based on the hang of the handle, they called it. The angle of the handle. And I like curly maple, so that's what I chose for my back saw handles. What else can I tell you? I've got some samples of these different things, parts and pieces here that you can look at. Something that was key to doing all of this stuff is a punch. You can try drilling holes through this spring steel, but it'll make your drill bit glow and then sag into a mess real fast. Even carbide bits just don't do it. So you have to have a punch. And Whitney Roper is a company that's been in business for well over 100 years, and you can buy this thing kind of locally. And you have different size punches that are available. And this thing works well for the very thin plate for the small back saws. When you get into the bigger ones, it doesn't have enough strength. I found an antique Whitney Roper. It was patented in patent date on it of 1908. And the handle is this long, and this whole thing weighs about 20 pounds. And I think it's classified as a 5-ton punch. So it goes through this stuff pretty easily. I think it'll go through 1/4-inch brass and whatever, but that was key. I mean, I used that on the bevels to cut this, to end up with this slot. I just punched and punched and punched, and then filed away the rest. All these squares, I made I just kind of went nuts. I had the time, so just keep making more squares. And again, the steel is the same as the saws, but it's a lot thicker. The method of attaching them are these diamonds, which are riveted diamonds. Again, it's a traditional English style. And each one of these diamonds, I cut the diamonds on a bandsaw. It's 1/8 inch thick brass. Cut them on the bandsaw, then I individually beveled them a little bit for recessing them. I would mark out where I wanted them, length and the width and stuff on both sides. And then I would put the diamonds on those cross marks and hold it down with a punch and scribe around it with a knife, and then begin to excavate it. And I would use a drill bit that was as close to the width as I could in a brace. It only took about 2 turns to get down that low. And then I used a router to get into the corners. And this is my router. It's a hex key that I ground a point onto it, and it works perfectly for just getting in the corners of everything. And leveling, it'll level it off. Right.
Do those diamonds go all the way through?
No, they're 1/8 of an inch thick, so they're just.
How are they
inlaid.
attached? Are they screwed together, or?
It's an 1/8 inch mild steel rod is a rivet.
Okay. And then the big thing is, how the hell do you square them up after you pound and bang on it and put them together?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. You hope, a lot of hope. Yeah, because this thing got to be taken off and on. The blades has to be taken off and on, 4 times, 3 or 4 times. So I would put one in, punch the hole, and square it with a machinist square, and clamp it tight. And then I would use a marker for the other 3 holes, and then punch those. Well, everything gets wiggled a little bit. But most of them, I think I made 5 of these things, and most of them were square, but the ones that aren't, you file it off. Not a big deal. Everything is filed. I mean, these had to be filed smooth afterwards because you're hammering on them. This brass plate is attached with glue and screws, and I was lucky, just lucky, to get screws that were the same metal content as the plate here, so that they mostly pretty much disappeared. I just you know, left them up high so that the slot was filed off. And then this design on the end, somebody asked me if that was to make a molding with, and that would be kind of awkward, but it's just it's a Cupid's bow, is what it's called. And it was a traditional thing to put on the end of steel pieces in 18th century England. I thought it was kind of cool. So again, files, the hammers. So this is the first hammer I made, and I use wooden planes a lot and infill planes. And so you have to hit the stock of the plane with a hammer to loosen the blade. And then you use a metal hammer to tap the blade down to adjust it. There's no adjusting nuts on it. And so I had a round wooden mallet on the bench and a steel hammer. And I thought I'd really like to put that all into one. So I came up with this design, and this head I got off of eBay, and it was about this big. And I just started hacksawing and filing until I got to the shape and the weight that I wanted. And the head is domed a little bit, and then I've got a piece of thick leather glued onto here so it won't hurt anything, won't dent anything when you strike it. And the back of this works for the blades. And really, this thing sits on my bench all the time. I use it for all my chiseling, taking things apart, putting them back together. It's just a nice weight that it works for everything. And these hammers, this is one of 3. This is called a Warrington pattern hammer. And this is the peen end, and it's shaped this way for starting nails. You put a nail between your 2 fingers, and if you use a big head, you're going to smash your fingers maybe. But if you use this end, you're going to go between your fingers, hopefully, and hit the nail. That's why. So these were, this head started out as a piece of square 01 tool steel. The head was turned round on a lathe. And then from that point, the rest of the stuff was sawn off and filed. And then the heads are tempered, so they're hardened and tempered. So this was something I made, again, it was a group project out at Mike's shop, and none of us knew anything about hardening and tempering, and we had to build a little kiln and that sort of thing. So that was, everybody's learning something and a lot of work. Yeah, if you want to, sure. Or they can come up afterwards, one or the other. So the bevels, again, I use the diamonds. This is a solid, this is made from 2 pieces of brass. Very, very thick stock, 1/4 inch thick. And I use a milling machine to excavate this. And it was an old one, so it got a hand crank. So you crank it like here to move it this way, and then you move it this way and drop it a couple of thousandths. And it was just hours and hours of cranking like this to get this excavated. But then there's a piece of brass the same thickness as the blade in the bottom, and that's 2 rivets holding it together. And the diamonds is the same operation as the squares, Except on the inside, between here, there's no diamond in there. It's just part of the rivet. The blades, as I said, were, the slot was punched out and then filed. The screws, I think it's a cheese head screw that I found to use. I needed 4 of them and I had to buy a bag of 100. So if anybody needs any of these things, I have a lot of them. The spoke shaves, the hardware is from a Lee Valley kit. And it's really a good functioning thing if you want to build your own spoke shave. But I had this this is rosewood and sapwood and heartwood. So I had this long piece and I made this one, and then that kind of was neat. So I built the bigger one. And the third one has a rounded bottom for an inside radius. Again, the shape is traditional wooden spoke shape. Scraper. These were pretty common in the antique world, in the antique woodworking world. People, instead of holding it with your hand, if you had something that was narrow enough, this worked really well. Pardon me? Yeah, and it's a saw steel again, spring steel. And I put brass on the bottom for wear. And again, this Cupid's bow is just a decoration. I've stabbed myself more than once with a regular scraper and press down on the corners. Don't like that. Marking gauges. I had quite a selection of antique gauges, and I thought, well, I'll try to make my own. So these turned out, I use them all the time. I've got, this one's got a knife blade in it. The blade is made from a, what do you call it? Jigsaw. It's a jigsaw blade that I filed the teeth off of. It's nice steel. I have a 3/8 tap and die, a wooden one, and so that's what I use to thread this thing. Turn these knobs on my high-tech Shopsmith lathe, and I've got a thick piece of leather inside here that this presses down on. That's what bears down on the beam. It locks it really without much pressure at all. And so I've got this. I've got one with a blade. I've got one with the round nail. I've got one with a pencil. You just keep making them. Let's see. Oh yeah, this guy. So this is called a bow saw or a turning saw. This is the smallest one that I made, and the last one I made. I've got 2 that are just incrementally larger. This one has a scroll saw blade in it and works really well for cutting the waste out of dovetails. This was again as a group project out at Mike's that we made these parts, and we'll show you. Get it open. Well, this is what's inside the handle. It's tapered. So it's tapered on the inside of the handle. It's a press fit. And then the other end that attaches to the blade is also tapered. That goes through the handle. And so we made some reamers with the same taper. And we just would slowly work the ream into the handle and the body till things fit. So that's how it will turn. It's snug, but it won't. There's no leather washers or anything. And so far, it's not slipped in the handle. A lot of the old ones have a brass pin through it, so it doesn't slip, but so far this hasn't. These, I think they're called rondelles, not like the 50s song. But I made those, I ground a spade bit to this shape and put it in the drill press and just turned it really slowly. This is ebony and it chips out really quick, easily, but that's how I made these decorations. And of course, being in here in a rounded shape, it allows these arms to move should the next blade be a little shorter or longer. It can pivot easily. It just tightens up with this winding stick. And again, it's curly maple and ebony. Had a big block of that from someplace. So along with the punch that was central to everything, my files get used for everything. I got these things at McMaster Carr. They're Diston, but they're graded from 00 to up to 4 is what I have them. And 4 is so fine, it's like 600 grit sandpaper. So that's what was used to file these saw handles. I didn't use sandpaper on them. I just was able to smooth them and shape them at the same time. And because I do a lot of hand work with all this stuff, I use them all the time. They're kind of expensive, but they get used all the time. And then one last thing was this dovetail guide. I had been using this little tiny bevel, and that works just fine. But I just thought, well, why don't I make some dovetail guide? So I had a piece of crotch walnut, and it was big enough to cut up, and they worked pretty cool. So I think that's everything I have here. This is just one of the blades from one of the bevels. Any questions?
Thanks, John. I have several questions. So the blade plates are not hardened at all. It's just the straight spring steel.
Right.
Okay,
They'd snap if they were hardened, in
Okay.
use.
got it. How does one get in on this maker club at Mike's school?
There's a
Or does he offer classes, or do you guys offer classes on similar topics?
He doesn't, he hasn't. He offers a lot of introductory classes, he teaches saw sharpening and that sort of thing. But these things can take a long time and many beers is what it is. So, and it's just all kind of working out as it goes.
I see.
Plus you have to have the room. He's got room to have a kiln in part of his shop. You got to have someplace where you can light a big fire and maybe have a big Bridgeport mill sitting around doing nothing, things like that. Not that it couldn't be done by hand, but right now, if you talk to him, and he'll put
I'll
up a
do
class
that.
for anything if he gets enough inquiries about it.
The other question I have is how you stain your maple.
Okay, I use a two-step process in the dyeing. I use Lockwood dyes. They're based in New York. They've been in business over 100 years. They make powders, and they're water soluble or alcohol soluble. I use the water base, and you get a little paper package. I think it's probably an ounce, and it's like $5 or $6 or something. It's really cheap. Makes about a quart of this stuff, depending on the how strong you want it. But so with these things, I would dye it first with like a brown maple. They all have names. It's not, they don't call it red and crimson and all this. They have names for all this stuff. So I would use a dark brown maple, and then I'd sand the wood until it, the dark brown soaks into the soft part of the grain on this thing. And then you just sand off all the top. So you got white wood and dark wood. And then I will dye it again with like a golden or an amber maple. and then put the finish on it. Any other questions?
Okay, John, great job. Very beautiful tools.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank all four of our presenters for the great presentations tonight. Coming up next month, we're going to be visiting the American Crafts Council in Minneapolis. So that'll be probably the second week in June. So pay attention to the website. We'll also be sending some emails out. That's going to do it for tonight. So thanks for everyone for coming out. Thanks for everybody on Zoom for attending. Have a good night.